My name is Chelsea Parker. I've been married for 3 years and have lived with my in-laws from the start. There's no such thing as a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law feud in my in-laws' home. My mother-in-law is kind and treats me like her own daughter. However, conversely, the distance between my husband, Kevin, and me has grown, and recently he has been coming home less frequently. Seeing this, my mother-in-law apologized, feeling sorry for me. But it's not her fault. I'm really sorry. It's been 3 years since you got married and that boy. It's not your fault. But I must have raised him wrong. That's not true at all. I'm actually envious of how a kind parent like you raised him. Besides, I've given up on Kevin and I'm not expecting anything from him anymore. If you only heard these words, you might think what a cold wife I am. But there are feelings between my mother-in-law and me that only we can understand. That's right. I think that's best. My son has made my wonderful daughter-in-law feel sad. Relying on such a fool won't help at all. He's the child she bore and raised. It can't be what she really feels. These words must be an attempt to understand my feelings. My mother-in-law and I care for each other, and our relationship has deepened thanks to my foolish husband. Then, one day, a huge amount of luggage was delivered to our house. What? What's all this luggage? As I was shocked, Kevin's face emerged from among the luggage. From today, I'll be living here with my mistress and our secret child. What? What do you mean? That means my mistress and our child will live here too. Basically, you're not needed anymore. Not needed? What are you saying, Kevin? Mom, just keep quiet. It's already decided. Here, take this divorce paper and leave. And make sure to file it as soon as possible. I'm gonna remarry Mary. Mary? Yeah, my mistress. Mom, it's your grandchild. His name is Rick. He's 4 years old, so please take care of him. 4 years old? Stunned, I just stared at the young child. My mother-in-law sighed deeply. Is this the ending to our marriage that my husband decided? My husband and his mistress seemed happy as they moved their belongings into the house. As I watched the two of them, I wondered why I had ever married such a person, reminiscing about the past. After graduating from high school, I chose the path of working from home instead of getting a job. I preferred doing what I love over interacting with people and experiencing stress. However, this meant I had no opportunities to meet anyone, and as everyone around me got married, I was left behind. Every time I met my uncles and aunts, they would ask, "When are you gonna get married?" And I got tired of hearing it over and over. So, I attended a matchmaking party held in town. That's where I met Kevin. Kevin's condition for marriage was a kind woman who would be okay with living with his parents. He wanted a homemaker who was family-oriented. But he complained that no woman these days would accept such conditions. I'm not a homemaker, but I hardly ever leave the house, and since my parents passed away early, I was happy about the idea of living with his parents. Kevin was a kind man, and I could tell he cared deeply for his parents. I thought I could build a happy family with him. So, I agreed to marry him. And so, things progressed smoothly, and we ended up having a small wedding ceremony. Soon after getting married, I started living at my in-laws' house, but his father wasn't there. Apparently, he had passed away early, and Kevin had been raised by his mother alone since he was in elementary school. I thought I'd be alone in my old age, but to have you live with me, I'm truly thankful and happy. She said as she took my hand when we started living together. From that day on, she treasured me as her daughter-in-law. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask me. I'll try not to be in the way since you're newlyweds, but if there's anything you dislike, please tell me honestly. She was always so considerate that I felt sorry for her. 3 years have passed, but we still haven't been blessed with children. My husband said to me, "You can't even give her a grandchild, you're really a failure as a wife. Other wives get pregnant right after marriage. I never thought it would be this difficult for you. This marriage was a mistake." Saying so, my husband started to berate me. It is indeed painful for me not to be able to give my mother-in-law a grandchild. If I could, I would want to have a grandchild for her right away. But it seems fate is not on my side, as every month ends in disappointment. My husband, who doesn't understand my sadness at all, only throws more hurtful words at me. Because of this, my heart has grown colder. I may indeed have made a mistake with this marriage. Although I think so, I have no complaints about my mother-in-law. That's why, no matter what my husband said, I've endured it for her sake. However, my husband gradually stopped coming home, and when he did, he would change clothes and leave right away. With no communication, there was no chance of having children. Yet, my mother-in-law remained ever kind. Children are gifts from heaven. It's not your fault, Chelsea. You shouldn't worry about it. An angel will surely come to you soon. What? Isn't it because your body is too old? If it's useless, then you don't need it. How could he say something like that? I couldn't even cry anymore. Then came his declaration of having a mistress. On top of that, he mentioned having a child and shoved the divorce papers at me. Although I thought it was the worst, I muttered to myself, well, I knew it, but this is just too much. As I was thinking about this, Kevin added insult to injury. Hey, when are you gonna leave? Get out of here now. His harsh words snapped me back to reality, and I responded. I've already moved into a high-rise condo, you know? What are you talking about? You're right here. You don't remember anything, do you? We were divorced a month ago. Huh? Haven't you come back once in the last month? Or did you come back and not notice that my stuff was gone? Kevin looked at me bewildered. But what I was saying was true. What do you mean? I didn't sign any divorce papers. How could the divorce have been finalized? Remember coming back very drunk a month ago? Kevin thought hard and then quietly said, "Ah." It seems he remembered. That time, you confessed about having a mistress and a child. Though I didn't know about the 4-year-old. You told me everything then. Everything? Mary has been your girlfriend since before our marriage, right? But you wanted to marry her even though she already had a husband. And the child wasn't her husband's but yours. All this while, her husband believed it was his and cared for the child, but you would sometimes meet up and treat him as your own. I said all that? If I hadn't heard it from you, I wouldn't know, would I? Well, that's true. Eventually, on the day you all met, the child told her husband that he had met another daddy and had a great time. Thanks to that, she ended up divorcing, but it was lucky for you since you wanted to marry her. She almost lost the child during the divorce, but she revealed the child was yours and not her husband's, so she didn't lose him. But her husband was furious. Exactly. Such a petty man. That's when, happy about being able to marry her, your mother said, if that's the case, it's better for you to divorce Chelsea. I was surprised but agreed with your mother and consented to the divorce. You were so happy about me agreeing to divorce, you wanted to shout for joy. I see. So that happened. I completely forgot. That's right. So you signed the divorce papers then and there, and I filed them the next day. I see. But then why are you still here? If we're divorced, it's strange for you to be here, isn't it? You haven't been coming back, Kevin. Even though our divorce was finalized and I moved out of the house, I heard from your mom that you hardly ever come back. I thought she might be feeling lonely, so I've been coming here during the day to work. At night, I go back to my own place. That's why I didn't know whether you were coming back at night or not. Your mom didn't want to worry me, so she didn't say anything. I see. And so, we've been strangers for over a month now. Finally got it, huh? But, man, I really don't remember anything. How can you be such a person? Coming back home after a long while only to be drunk, and then you start talking about having a mistress. Don't you ever think about how hard this has been on Chelsea? There's nothing I can do about it if I don't remember. Chelsea is just calmly talking about it, but any other woman would have made a big deal out of it. You could have been a bit more tactful. And you too, Mary. I don't mind you remarrying, but you shouldn't expect happiness after stealing someone's husband. What you did is unforgivable. Mom, she's the one who's gonna live with you, so don't say things like that. Otherwise, you'd end up living alone, wouldn't you? That would be lonely and awful, right? How can you say that? You were always hanging around some woman and not coming home. Didn't you think that was lonely? Chelsea was there, so it was fine. How stupid can you be? Anyway, the divorce is a done deal, right? So there's no point in bringing it up again now. It's not over at all. You coming back now has brought everything back up. Plus, having a 4-year-old kid. Wasn't this going on even before you were married? Well, yeah. And it continued even after you got married. How much more can you disrespect someone? Yes, after all this. Say whatever you want. How long will you be able to behave like that? Indeed, Kevin has a specialized job that pays well. Thanks to that, we never had any financial difficulties. So even with the divorce, I had no worries about separating, but Kevin didn't know that. It's fine. I feel sorry for you, but when I realized what kind of person he was, any lingering feelings I had were completely gone. I'm truly sorry. His mother apologized. After that, I lived alone in a high-rise condo, enjoying a peaceful life. The view from the upper floors was beautiful, and I continued to work from home as usual, but it felt peaceful. However, during such times, Kevin contacted me again. Have you seen Mom? She's missing, Kevin said, sounding either anxious or worried despite claiming to be searching for her. What do you mean missing? She hasn't come back for several days. You've waited several days to start looking for her? I thought she might have gone to a friend's place. Plus, it's hard to tell if she's around or not, so I wasn't really worried. How could this be? He didn't notice his own mother was missing? But now, it's becoming a problem. A problem? Yeah, without Mom, the house is a mess. She isn't here to clean up. What? I don't understand. Well, I did get remarried, but Mary doesn't do anything around the house. Thanks to that, it's just filled with trash. She doesn't clean, dishes and candy wrappers are left everywhere, and so are our clothes. It's a sad sight. I understand it's a terrible situation, but how can he still be laughing about it? What kind of nerves does he have? That sounds just like you, Kevin. Yeah, that's why I'm in trouble without Mom. I don't get it. Why doesn't your wife do anything? Well, her previous husband did everything himself and hated it when Mary moved anything. He liked to clean and organize things his way, and if Mary tidied up, he couldn't find anything and would get upset. After years of that, Mary just stopped doing anything at all. That sounds like a convenient excuse. Even if she had a husband like that, she should start doing things herself once he was gone. It seems more likely that she was always the type not to do anything. And Kevin, being similar, never saw it as a problem until the situation became dire. It must have become such a disastrous situation that he thought, this is terrible, I have to do something about it. And suddenly, he remembers his mother. And now she's telling me to do it. I told her I couldn't, but she said I could because her previous husband did, insisting it's not impossible because I'm a man too. But I never did anything when I was with you, and before we got married, Mom did everything, so really, I can't. It's not that he can't, he just doesn't want to. When we were together, his mother always kept things tidy, and she would help me clean, but Kevin never did any cleaning himself. Sometimes I wondered if Kevin could even put on his own socks. I even thought that at times. Well, that wasn't actually the case. So why exactly is it a problem if your mom isn't around? I'd understand if you were worried about her, but I can't grasp why you're troubled just because she's not here to clean. Well, when I suggested we live with my parents, I told her my mom would take care of everything since she was around. But she didn't like the idea because she said eventually Mom would get old and we'd have to take care of her. I said we could just put her in a nursing home then. She agreed to move in if she could think of Mom as a housemaid. How awful. He had been planning to use his mother as a substitute housemaid from the beginning. Because of this, Mom's not here and looking at the state of things. Mary started complaining that it's not like she has a maid at home. She says she wouldn't have divorced if she knew it was going to be like this. But it's not like we had a choice, considering the affair was out in the open. What awful people. Your mother is not some maid. Of course, she's not a maid. If she were, we'd have to pay her, but all we have to do is feed Mom. It's much better than a maid, he replied. What? That's not the point. Maybe I exaggerated a bit. I just wish she would act more like a housewife. That's all. Don't take it seriously. It's the same thing. You're expecting an elderly woman to work forever. There's a limit to being ridiculous. Do you know where Mom might be, anyway? Since you got along with her, maybe she told you something? That's ridiculous. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. I shouted, and then I hung up the phone. Looking to my side, there was my mother-in-law. I thought it would be something like this, she said with a smile. Actually, when Kevin signed the divorce papers a month ago, I really didn't care much about the divorce. I had more than enough income on my own, and I had been living practically without a husband, so I didn't feel. My mother-in-law hadn't realized I was doing so well financially. Thinking of me as a valuable daughter-in-law who married her foolish son, she had been saving from her meager income for emergencies. She offered that money to help me rent a condo. But that led us to decide that we should really teach Kevin a lesson. After discussing what kind of punishment would be suitable, we decided that if my husband ever came back home, my mother-in-law would leave the house. And she would live with me instead. We thought that since Kevin couldn't do anything by himself, his new wife would get fed up. But it turned out she couldn't do anything either. Well, they'll just have to live in the mess then. They won't die buried in trash. That was the first part of the punishment. Of course, we didn't plan to end it there. We have another punishment properly prepared. A few weeks later, Kevin contacted us again, as expected. Hey, I got hit with a demand for alimony. There's nothing to be surprised about. But why? You know how I got danged mentally because of you. You definitely owe alimony. And it's gonna be $60,000? I discussed this with a lawyer. Man, fine, I'll figure something out. But what's this about sending money to my mother? That's coming to her too? Oh, I've heard from your mother since then. I don't know where she is now, but she said she doesn't have any money and can't afford to live. But since I'm a stranger, there's nothing I can do, right? So I suggested that her son should send her some money. She always says her son is stingy, so I thought, why not send a letter addressed to his wife? It's a good idea, isn't it? A great idea! I mean, she said she'd starve to death without money. All I can do is suggest. Considering your income, you could send about $2,000, right? Alimony on top of sending money home is tough. I'll have to borrow to pay the alimony. That's not my problem. It's the consequence of your actions. Can you just not demand alimony? What are you talking about? That makes no sense. Please! That's none of my business. You destroyed someone else's life. What do you want me to do? I don't care. Please, don't get mad. Think about it, man. I owe $60,000. I'd have to get into debt to pay that. And if my mom starts needing money too, I can't repay the debts. You get that, right? Plus, I have a kid to raise. Everyone's got the same problems. You live in a high-rise, you must have a decent income, right? I wonder why you have so much money, but if you do, you surely don't need alimony. You're being foolish. Take responsibility for your own actions. I divorced you. Kevin, knowing I wouldn't withdraw the demand for alimony, hung up the phone disappointedly. I thought I would let it go if he didn't call anymore, but he's just too selfish. So, I decided it was time for my last resort. A few days later, social media was buzzing with a certain topic. Is it fact or fiction? Many people speculated as they tried to uncover the truth. Knowing this would happen, I smirked while looking at my phone. Then the phone rang. It was my ex-husband, Kevin. "Hello? What should I do?" In a fluster, Kevin couldn't hide his anxiety as he said this. What happened? I knew why he was upset without asking. But I wanted to know exactly how my trap was tormenting him. "Aren't you looking at the internet?" "I am checking it now. There's nothing major happening." "It's not in the news." "Oh, if it's not the news, then what is it?" "Somehow, the stuff about me and Mary has leaked online." "Really? That can't be. Who would know such personal details?" "Oh, I might know." "Who knows about it?" "At least you and I, Mary, her ex-husband, and your mother." "Who would leak such a thing online?" "I don't think anyone would." "What happened exactly?" Then he sent me a URL. Opening it, there was indeed a sensational story about Kevin and Mary's affair. However, everything is anonymized, leaving no certainty to the details. Moreover, it's written in a very sensational and humorous way, making it hard to tell what is true. "This is about me and Mary, right?" Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But it's not the end of the world just because it's written, right? "It is a big deal. It doesn't mention the company by name, but someone's digging, and from our relationship, they're guessing who we are. They've traced it back to the company and even figured out where we live." That's some skilled detective work. The story just mentions that Mary was married to her ex-husband while having an affair with Kevin, bearing his child, and betraying her ex. It's written in a way that's bound to spread and has sparked curiosity about who it could be. Certainly, for doing such things, it's natural to be criticized as being unreasonable or inhumane. "The company's name got out, and it's hurting our business. The company figured it out, and now they know it's me." I figured. "People at work are furious. Because of this, I got fired. Why does this have to be written? Who wrote it? It wasn't you, was it?" Kevin's voice was fearful, but it wasn't me. However, I do have a friend who's an influencer. I had talked to her about Kevin's cheating. I knew this would happen if I talked about it. She excels in gossip and has a knack for finding juicy stories to write about, often creating a media frenzy with her articles. I didn't write it. I'm not that talented. But I did talk to a friend about it. Your actions were so appalling that I needed advice. Maybe she decided to write about it." "What have you done?" "Well, no real names are used, and it wouldn't be clear unless someone dug deep. That shows you how scary the internet can be." "It's not just scary. I've been fired. It's almost like I got fired because of you. What are you gonna do about this? Now I have no income." "You've reaped what you sowed, haven't you?" I just talked to a friend, and she wasn't trying to expose anything. The internet detectives who found out aren't her fault. If anyone's to blame, it's you, for cheating on your wife for 3 years, and Mary, for having an affair and a child with you while deceiving her husband. Don't blame others for your own faults. "That's true, but now Mary and I are always fighting. She blames me for everything." "Well, you're both to blame." "In the end, she left just a divorce paper and walked out. Now she's also demanding child support. What should I do?" "Oh, collateral damage." "I have no job, the amount demanded is huge, I'm in debt, and it's the worst. Plus, my mother is nowhere to be found. Can you help me?" I smiled when we parted, but I've always thought since then. "What?" "You deserve to go to hell." "That's harsh." Kevin kept calling, trying at least to find his mother so they could live together. When I asked why, it turned out he still wanted her to do the housework and live with him so he wouldn't have to send her money. Given his endlessly scheming nature, I have not disclosed the whereabouts of his mother. Kevin now sends money monthly to his mother, pays child support to Mary, and struggles to repay the debts he incurred for me. He complained that the amount was substantial, and had he not been fired, he might have managed somehow. But no amount of grumbling changes things. Although he found a new job, he's struggling with the unfamiliar work. The job alone isn't enough to cover his expenses, so he works extra shifts at night and on weekends. To cut costs, he moved into a notoriously haunted place because the rent for a single person seemed wasteful, but the place is so creepy that he can hardly bring himself to go home. He only visits during the day to change clothes. Considering how much he's wasting on the rent, he thought about renting a storage unit instead. However, with no fixed address, he would struggle to find a decent job, so he reluctantly continues to live in the haunted house. Thanks to this, he still sends money to his mother every month. As for me, I'm living in a high-rise condo with my mother-in-law. Our life together is very comfortable. I'm busy with work, but she takes care of the household chores. We cook dinner together and enjoy our time. It feels like I'm living with my real mother, and I feel the greatest happiness.
What is this? Could it be a human?
What I saw when I visited my parents' house after a long time was shocking. It was a skeleton lying in the yard. This skeleton was clearly not from any wild animal. It was unmistakably human. Lying on its back with its feet towards me, it reminded me of a skeletal model I had seen in elementary school. Chills ran all over my body, and I felt nauseous. But when I looked at the skeleton again, I realized something.
No way! Could it be my father-in-law?
The skeleton was in tatters, but clothes were still clinging to it. And the pattern matched the work clothes I had gifted my father-in-law. Afterward, I called the police, and the area was in uproar for a while. However, at night, I discovered a shocking fact from my father-in-law's diary.
No way! But if that's true, then
Trembling, I muttered to myself and at the same time resolved to uncover the truth. My name is Rachel Miller. I am a 33-year-old. I grew up in New York. Actually, my father passed away from illness when I was in my early 20s. I was deeply saddened when I lost my father, who was kind and hardworking. But I made an effort not to worry my father in heaven and managed to get a job at the company I hoped for. After working for a few years, my job was fulfilling and rewarding, but being somewhat shy, I hadn't managed to find a romantic partner. I was considering finding a partner when my father's brother, who had always doted on me since I was a child, Uncle Travis, spoke to me. Rachel, if you're okay with it, would you like to meet one of my subordinates sometime? When I was surprised, my uncle said, I was asked by your dad to take care of Rachel. He's a proud subordinate of mine, good-natured and competent at his job. How about just meeting him? I couldn't refuse my uncle's invitation and responded, if I'm okay with it. My uncle was a manager at a major corporation, and his subordinate would certainly be considered an elite. I was nervous about meeting such a person, but I was also a bit excited. After some time, we arranged to meet face-to-face. Set up by my uncle, we had the chance to meet alone in a restaurant. Nice to meet you, I'm Aaron Miller. You must be Rachel, right? The man who approached me was tall, impeccably dressed in a suit, and handsome. Yes. I'm Rachel. Nice to meet you. Afterward, Aaron and I decided to have dinner together. At first, the atmosphere was a bit awkward, but Aaron listened attentively to my stories, and by the end, we were both smiling more. We exchanged contact information and even made plans to meet again. On one of our dates, Aaron confessed his feelings to me. Rachel, would you consider a serious relationship with me, with marriage in mind? I really like you. You're kind and have a calming presence. I quietly responded. I'm flattered. But is it because my uncle is your boss? Aaron looked surprised. Not at all. Sure, our meeting was through the director, but now, as a person and a man, I'm drawn to you. Would you consider dating me? At that moment, Aaron looked unsure of himself, and I reassured him. I'm happy, Aaron. And that's how Aaron and I started dating. He was always kind to me during our relationship, and I found myself increasingly attracted to him. I was even certain he was the only one I could ever marry. After dating for about a year and a half without any issues, Aaron proposed on my birthday. Of course, I joyfully accepted, and we were officially engaged. After getting my mother's blessing, we went to greet the uncle who had introduced us, and he said with a smile, "You two are getting married, huh? I'm glad my introduction worked out. Please take good care of my dear niece." Aaron straightened up and replied with a firm yes, while I watched the scene with a smile. Later, we went to Aaron's family home to formally announce our engagement. Aaron's family home was located deep in the mountains of a distant county. My mom left when I was little, and she has a new family now, so we don't keep in touch. It's just my dad living there now. On the way to his family home, Aaron explained this to me. We originally lived in town, but Dad wanted to pursue pottery and bought a house deep in the mountains. He's kind of a stubborn old man now and doesn't really mingle with the neighbors. I hope you'll like him, Rachel. Though Aaron sounded worried, I smiled and reassured him, it's going to be fine, though I felt a bit anxious myself. Aaron's car continued deeper into the mountains, and I was surprised since I usually didn't go to such places. Eventually, we stopped in front of a large, old farmhouse. "Rachel, this is my family home." Nervously, I followed Aaron inside. We were greeted by a man in work clothes with a gruff expression. "Dad, this is my fiancée, Rachel." "Rachel, this is my father, Michael." Aaron introduced us. "Nice to meet you, I'm Michael, Aaron's father. Thank you for coming all the way to this remote place." I hastily introduced myself and handed over a gift. As Aaron expressed his desire to marry me, my father-in-law stared intently at me. "Are you sure about Aaron, Rachel?" I was momentarily taken aback by his words. Aaron was both handsome and capable, a true elite. Everyone said he was beyond reproach. Perhaps this kind of statement was just a parent's modesty. Aaron is kind and promising, and really more than I deserve. Upon hearing this, my father-in-law slowly nodded. "Then, I also approve of the marriage. Please take good care of my son." Relieved, I sipped the coffee he had offered and then commented, "This mug is wonderful. It fits so well in the hand, and the color is lovely." At that, the stern look on my father-in-law's face softened momentarily. "I made it myself. Would you like to take a look at my workshop?" Having been interested in pottery, I was delighted to take him up on his offer. The pottery my father-in-law made was truly impressive without any flattery, and I was amazed. He even had a website to showcase his pottery and received orders from customers. As I asked questions enthusiastically, my father-in-law answered with a beaming smile. I felt that my so-called stubborn father-in-law was actually a warm person. "Well, Dad, it's time to go. We have plans afterward." My father-in-law saw us off. "He is wonderful," I said in the car on the way home, and Aaron gave a wry smile. "I find him tough and a bit difficult, but I'm glad you liked him." With that, Aaron drove us back towards the city for about 2 hours. We had plans to meet some of Aaron's friends next. He was going to introduce me to his friends from his student days. When we arrived at the promised pub, about 7 of Aaron's friends were already gathered. I thought to myself, oh. Because one of them was a woman. She had light brown hair, a feminine appearance, and frankly, she was beautiful. "These are my closest friends from high school." I introduced myself. Then the woman with light brown hair came over and said, "Nice to meet you, Lillian. Rachel, I'm looking forward to getting to know you." Taken aback by her forwardness as she linked arms with me, Aaron said with a wry smile, "Lillian, don't be too familiar." "Rachel, this is Lillian, a classmate from high school." I said, "Nice to meet you," and Lillian turned to Aaron.
"Aaron, it's been a while. How's your dad?"
It seemed Lillian was also acquainted with Aaron's father. After that, we were surrounded by Aaron's other male friends and began to eat, but I was distracted by Lillian, who stuck close to Aaron's side. Aaron and Lillian were chatting amicably, mostly about high school memories, and there didn't seem to be anything particularly suspicious. Eventually, the evening ended without incident, and Aaron and I returned to New York. Not long after, Aaron and I registered our marriage. We had a wedding ceremony and began living together. At our wedding, my father-in-law gave us a pair of mug cups that he had made himself. I happily accepted the gift, saying, "I'll cherish it." At that time, I exchanged contact information with my father-in-law, and we began to keep in touch occasionally. I was worried about my father-in-law living alone, but Aaron didn't seem too concerned, making me wonder if this was just a typical father-son relationship. Whenever I messaged, "How are you?" he would reply, though briefly. When I commented on his work, he would even send me his new pieces. After we got married and started living together, Aaron often wanted to return to his hometown.
"I just want to see my friends back home. It's fine if I go alone. Why don't you relax at your parents' place?"
He would say this and go back about twice a month, staying overnight. Aaron was still a great husband who helped around the house and treated me well, but his frequent trips back home started to bother me. Sometimes I would go with him, but I'd be left at his parents' house because I want to drink with just my guy friends. During those times, I would cook for my father-in-law and chat with him. Aaron would stay overnight in a hotel because he had been drinking and would pick me up the next day from his parents' house. I found it difficult to ask Aaron to cut back on his trips home. I didn't want to feel like I was tying him down. Gradually, I reduced how often I went with him, eventually only accompanying him once every 3 months to visit my father-in-law. However, I believe my relationship with my father-in-law was good. I even gave him a new work uniform for Father's Day, and he was always concerned about my health. Then, one summer day in the second year of our marriage, Aaron went home alone, and when he returned, he locked himself in the bathroom immediately. From inside, I could hear him retching.
"What's wrong, Aaron? Are you feeling sick?"
I asked, worried, and when he came out, his face was pale, and he said,
"Maybe I ate something bad. Don't worry about me, Rachel."
About 2 weeks later, Aaron came home from work and told me, "I've decided to accept the company's offer for a 1-year assignment in Kentucky." Shocked by the sudden news, I asked if I should come with him, but he said, "You have your job, Rachel. It's better if I go alone. I'd like you to look after the house." Though I felt lonely, I nodded. Aaron promised to come home often, and since I wanted to continue my work, I was somewhat relieved. Thus, Aaron and I began living apart for a while. It was lonely living alone, but Aaron frequently called me on video. In Kentucky, Aaron lived alone in a condo rented by his company, but I wasn't worried because he was capable of handling household tasks. Once, I visited Aaron's place in Kentucky.
"Hey, Aaron, did you change your hobbies?"
I asked as I entered. He looked surprised.
"Since when did you like floral-scented aroma diffusers? And the curtains, you always liked brown or beige, but these are bright orange."
The aroma was a gift from a coworker.
"And the curtains were just something I bought on sale. Nothing special, really?"
I believed Aaron's words at that time. Back then, I didn't have a driver's license, so I couldn't visit my father-in-law after Aaron was assigned alone. Instead, I had been sending messages, but the replies weren't coming quickly.
"Aaron, I've tried contacting your dad, but he hasn't responded. Do you think something might have happened?"
I asked during a video call one day and Aaron replied, "Dad said he's busy with his pottery work. I guess he'll get back to you eventually." At first, I didn't worry too much because Aaron said so. However, I became increasingly concerned as there were no updates on my father-in-law's website. Since Aaron had been assigned elsewhere, I had some time for myself and had been attending driving school. When I finally got my license, I decided to visit my father-in-law. I tried to call Aaron to tell him, but he didn't answer, perhaps busy with work. Since Aaron had taken the car to his assignment, I traveled by train to his hometown, then rented a car to go to his family home. I bought some gifts for my father-in-law and got into the rental car. It was the end of winter, and the warm air from the car's heater felt comforting. I wondered if my sudden visit would be a nuisance, but decided that seeing his face would be enough. With these thoughts, I drove on. By evening, I finally arrived at the quiet family home, where only the sound of birds could be heard. I rang the doorbell, but my father-in-law didn't come out.
Hey, it's Rachel. Are you there?
I called from outside the entrance. Still no answer. Wondering if he was out, I tried the door and it slid open. The inside was silent and smelled dusty. My father-in-law likes cleanliness, so the house should have been clean, but it felt like no one had lived there for months. I hesitated to enter uninvited.
Maybe he's in the workshop.
The workshop was accessible through the garden. I walked from the entrance around to the garden side, heading towards the workshop. As I turned the corner to head to the garden, something unbelievable caught my eye, and I gasped. Then, in the next moment, I screamed. It felt as if the scream wasn't even mine. Cold sweat broke out all over, and my entire body felt like it was on edge.
What is this? Could it be a human?
What I saw was a skeleton lying in the garden. It was a skeleton lying in the garden. It was about 10 feet away from me. I couldn't bring myself to get any closer, and I stood there covering my mouth, staring in shock. The skeleton was clearly not from any wild animal. It was unmistakably human. Lying on its back with its feet facing me, it reminded me of a skeletal model I had seen in elementary school. Chills ran all over my body, and I felt nauseous. There was no foul smell, but I couldn't accept the bizarre scene before me. But when I looked at the skeleton again, I noticed something shocking.
No way! Could it be my father-in-law?
The skeleton was tattered, but clothes clung to it. And the pattern matched the work clothes I had gifted my father-in-law. The moment I realized this, I couldn't hold back any longer and vomited in a corner of the garden.
Right, I need to call the police.
I ran back towards the entrance and, with trembling hands, pulled out my phone to make the call. Is this regarding a crime or an accident? The operator asked, and I replied in a strained voice.
It's a crime. I came to visit my father-in-law and found him like this.
I then locked myself in the car and waited for the police to arrive, shaking. I tried calling Aaron several times during this, but he didn't answer. Soon, a police officer from the nearby station arrived. After seeing the scene in the garden, he immediately called for backup from the main station. Hours later, a large number of officers arrived and began examining the scene, causing quite a stir. I was questioned in detail by the police but could only respond, I just came to visit after a long time and found it like this. As night fell, my father-in-law was taken away. When the police were leaving, they mentioned they would investigate it as both an accident and a crime. How could this have happened to my father-in-law? A station officer replied.
We can't be sure yet. We need to investigate further. There seems to be damage to the skull. There was a large ladder nearby, so he might have fallen from it, or it might have unfortunately hit him on the head.
Indeed, I recalled seeing a ladder fallen in the garden. My father-in-law had mentioned that the house sometimes leaked, so he might have been fixing the roof. When the police had left, I finally received a call back from Aaron. What's going on, Rachel?
You've called so many times.
Shaking, I recounted everything to Aaron, who sounded genuinely shaken.
My dad, really?
Aaron's voice was indeed trembling. He seemed very disturbed. Aaron said he would come back home to New York immediately, and I decided to leave as well. But just as I was about to leave the family home, I felt as if someone was calling me from behind. Was something calling me? By what? Tentatively, I entered the family home again. Dazed, I walked towards my father-in-law's room. I can't explain why I did it. It felt as if something was instructing me to. Entering my father-in-law's room for the first time, it was dusty, and I inadvertently coughed. Then, I noticed a notebook on the desk. The moment I picked it up, the sensation of being called disappeared. Startled, I clutched the notebook and fled from my father-in-law's house as if escaping. I intended to return home to New York, but there were no trains left, so I hastily checked into a hotel near the station. Even after taking a shower, I felt a disturbing palpitation and couldn't eat anything. Trying to sleep was futile. The scene kept replaying in my mind, preventing any rest. Sitting on the bed, I opened the notebook I had brought from my father-in-law's house. It turned out to be his diary. His meticulous handwriting filled the pages.
Today, Aaron introduced me to a woman he wants to marry, Rachel. She seemed earnest and intelligent, and I had a good impression of her.
That's what was written about the day we first met. Tears involuntarily came to my eyes. Most of the diary entries were about his daily life and pottery, but Aaron and I also appeared occasionally.
Today Rachel visited. Aaron seems to have gone out drinking with friends again. I worry he might be making her feel lonely. However, the stew Rachel made was delicious. Today, she gave me a new work uniform for Father's Day. I liked the pattern. It's been a while since someone celebrated Father's Day for me, and I felt happy.
Tears streamed down my face as I read my father-in-law's words. But as I continued to read, I came across a passage that made me quicken my pace through the diary, reading it to the end.
No, can it be? But if that's true, then
Trembling, I murmured and clutched the diary to my chest, ready to face the truth. The next day, I returned to our home in New York. After a while, Aaron came home. He couldn't find a flight and had driven through the night.
Rachel, you must be shocked. I still can't accept it as reality,
Aaron said, looking pale. Later, we were called by the local police and questioned. It seemed my father-in-law had died around the summer. Because his house was isolated in the mountains and he had little interaction with neighbors, his death went unnoticed for a while. Aaron testified, the last time I saw him at the beginning of summer, he was in good health. I answered as I had been asked the day before. I hadn't seen him for months, and he stopped replying to my messages around the summer. Ultimately, the cause of my father-in-law's death was undetermined due to the decomposition, but it was speculated to be a tragic accident with the latter. After settling down a bit, Aaron and I held a small family funeral for my father-in-law and returned to our daily lives. 2 months after finding my father-in-law, Aaron took some time off from his assignment and came home. Since the incident, we hadn't talked much, and it was a rare face-to-face meeting. On the second night of Aaron's return, I prepared serving coffee in the mugs that my father-in-law had given us.
Hey, should we stop using these bowls? It feels like bad luck,
Aaron said, looking uneasy, but he finished his meal when I remained silent.
Thank you, it was delicious. What's on your mind, Rachel? You seem deep in thought.
Served him coffee after dinner and said, let's talk.
You look so serious.
I laid out several photos in front of Aaron. In the photo was a woman frequently entering and exiting Aaron's condo at his assignment location.
This is your friend from back home, Lillian, right?
Can you explain this? The color drained from Aaron's face as he stammered, How do you have this?
I've been suspicious of you. So, I asked my uncle to help me investigate your actions at your assignment. Why is Lillian coming in and out of your house?
Aaron looked away, his voice shaking as he explained.
That's because I heard Lillian was coming to visit as a tourist, so we just met up briefly. I swear, there's nothing more to it.
I sighed.
I also spoke to your friends back home. They said Lillian moved away around the same time you were assigned here. Essentially, she's been almost living with you for the past 2 months, right? To think you'd brazenly carry on an affair at your assignment.
Aaron was lost for words.
How did you find out?
I pulled out my father-in-law's diary. This is your father's diary. Let me read it to you.
Today, when I went to town, I saw Aaron and his ex-girlfriend Lillian holding hands. It seems they may still be involved. I'm conflicted about whether to tell Rachel.
As I read from the diary, Aaron's face grew increasingly pale.
Your father realized there was something between you and Lillian. His last entry reads, Tomorrow, I've called Aaron to talk. I intend to convince him to end things with Lillian and be honest with Rachel. If he pretends not to know, I'll have no choice but to tell her.
I stared directly at Aaron.
Aaron, you were with him on the day your father died, weren't you?
raising his voice, Aaron denied it.
No. When I last saw him, my father was well. His death was purely accidental.
I simply said, okay, and then pulled out a voice recorder from the table.
This was planted in your car the day after your father was found. I checked what was recorded last night.
Aaron's mouth fell open. I pressed play on the recorder.
It was tough, man. The police questioning was intense. Glad it seems to be going down as an accident, though.
Then Lillian's voice followed.
But it worked out, right? They don't know Aaron did it. I really hated that old man, you know? He tried to end things between us that day, so annoying.
Yeah, exactly.
When I played dumb, he threatened to tell Rachel. Things got heated, and I ended up hitting him with a hammer nearby. Then he stopped moving. But you gotta praise my quick thinking for knocking over that ladder.
Lillian laughed. Wow, classic Aaron. Good thinking.
If her uncle, my boss, finds out, it could mess up my career. But if getting rid of one stubborn old man secures my safety, it's a small price. And I want to keep seeing you after you come all the way to Kentucky for me.
Yeah.
After you got married, I realized it had to be you, Aaron. I'm glad you accepted my feelings after the wedding. It sucks that you have a wife, but you truly love me, right?
I stopped the recorder there. Aaron trembled violently, his face turning purple.
So, you were responsible for your father's death?
Aaron immediately apologized.
Rachel, please! Don't tell the police about this.
He clung to my feet as I remained silent.
Look, I'll admit to the affair and apologize. I'll break it off with Lillian. Just please, keep this quiet. It's already been handled as an accident.
His eyes were bloodshot. He continued to shake my shoulder, pleading.
It'll be bad for you too if your husband is found out as the culprit. Please, Rachel, take this to the grave with you.
That's when I finally spoke.
No, I will never forgive you.
Aaron's eyes widened in shock. What?
It's infuriating that you pretended to be a good husband while you were cheating. But what I cannot forgive, above all, is that you murdered a kind man, my father-in-law. I've decided to avenge his death.
At that moment, Aaron's face turned bright red, and he began to scream furiously.
You ungrateful wretch! Killing that old man doesn't make any difference. My career as an elite is what matters. I never loved you. I married you for my career, and now you repay my kindness with betrayal.
So this was Aaron's true nature. Strangely, I wasn't disappointed. He must have lost his temper like this when he killed his father too. Suddenly, Aaron's hand reached for my throat.
If you think about making this public, I'll kill you too.
I dodged and ran out to the front door. Aaron chased after me.
Stop it!
At the end of the hallway of the building, the police I had called were already there. Aaron continued to scream as he was restrained. Finally, I told Aaron.
I will never forgive you, neither will my father-in-law. We are getting a divorce. You better quietly accept your punishment.
Aaron was handcuffed and taken away. Later, based on the evidence I submitted, Aaron had no escape and confessed to the police. He was found guilty, of course, and went to prison. Lillian, who had conspired to cover up the facts, was also punished. I hired a lawyer and proceeded with the divorce from Aaron. Although he initially resisted, he eventually agreed to the divorce. The case made the news, and Aaron was obviously fired from the major corporation he worked for. My uncle said,
I'm so sorry for introducing you to such a terrible man. I really regret it.
I reassured him.
It's not your fault. It's all his doing, don't worry about it.
Although Lillian was released from prison relatively early, she was shunned by family, relatives, and friends and moved to a distant place. I heard she's working in a nightclub. As for Aaron, he is still in prison. Shunned by fellow inmates, with no one visiting him. I once received a letter from him, but I tore it up without reading. He will spend a long time behind bars. And even when he gets out, there will be no one to help him. I want nothing to do with him ever again. Meanwhile, soon after Aaron was arrested, I moved out of the condo we shared and went back to my childhood home. My mother, knowing everything, comforted me, saying, "You've been through a lot," and I couldn't help but cry in her arms. Since the news of Aaron's crime spread to my workplace, I resigned from my job. My uncle helped me find a new job. At this place, nobody knows about the incident, so I've been able to work in peace. I sometimes reread my father-in-law's diary.
Today, I finished a new set of dishes. I made them in the color Rachel said she liked. I wonder if she'll be pleased when I give them to her. Rachel is a good daughter-in-law. She's honest and kind. That's why I want Aaron to cherish her. I hope my wishes reach my son. I want Rachel to always be happy.
Each time I read my father-in-law's wishes and thoughts, it tightens my chest. When everything settled down, I visited my father-in-law's grave alone.
I have avenged your grievance. Please rest in peace.
I murmured this. Under the blue sky, a gentle breeze caressed my cheek. Ralph received the order to transfer for his solo assignment. At first, he diligently came back home, but lately, he's been distant. On Mark's birthday, we had planned to go to the amusement park, but he called to say he had to work. Listening to Mark's wish to see her dad, we went to Ralph's new location and found him holding a strange child, looking quite cozy with a woman. They looked like a family. When Ralph saw me, his face turned pale, and he stopped. I lowered my eyes and said,
"Sorry for disturbing your happiness."
"No, it's not what it looks like. There's a deep reason for this," Ralph stammered. "My mom introduced us. She said Linda was better suited for me than Sabrina. I couldn't refuse." "So you were out with her on Mark's birthday?" "Don't be ridiculous." "Huh? Is today the birthday?" Ralph's cluelessness disgusted me.
"Let's go, Mark."
I was fuming inside. I won't let this slide. My mother-in-law and Ralph. You'll see. I'm Sabrina, a full-time worker. Ralph and I met again at work 5 years ago, after being in the same college, and we started dating and got married. Ralph, with his handsome looks and gentle demeanor, was always surrounded by friends in college. Back then, he was out of reach, someone you couldn't casually approach. So, when he came to support my department at the company's headquarters, my heart skipped a beat. I remember being so happy when we were assigned to work on the same team. We became close, started dating, and got married. But our happy married life ended abruptly. After Ralph lost his father in adulthood, he lived with his mother, even after getting a job, to look after her. Even after we started living in the condo I bought when I was single, he frequently visited his mother to shop or chat with her. Eventually, I started to feel uneasy and asked Ralph.
"Ralph, are you thinking about living with your mom someday?"
Ralph waved his hand with a smile. "No way, not at all.
Mom likes her freedom too much for that." "I see."
I felt relieved as he continued.
"So I gave her a spare key. She said she wanted to come over whenever she felt like it." "Really?"
"Huh, was that not okay?" Ralph looked puzzled, and I wanted to hold my head in frustration. "Why do you do things without asking?" "What, is it bad?" "It's my room, isn't it?" Ralph pouted. "It's in my name. I bought it with my grandma's inheritance." "Well, whatever." He muttered, annoyed. "This is troubling, I can't exactly ask for the key back now. I can easily imagine what will happen next." And sure enough, my mother-in-law started making unannounced visits repeatedly. After our marriage, Ralph returned to work at the headquarters and often worked late, coming home later than me, who worked at a branch office. Anticipating this, my mother-in-law started showing up around my return time. When I dragged myself home, exhausted, and saw her car in the parking lot, my fatigue doubled. "Welcome home, Sabrina." "Good evening." I responded with a forced smile to my mother-in-law, who was lounging on the living room sofa as if it were her own. "Dinner's ready."
Let's eat together when Ralph gets home. Yes. Wait, didn't I make meatballs and salad? I asked, and she replied with a smile. Oh, I threw them out. They looked unappetizing. I rushed to the trash can to find the dinner I had gotten up at 4:30 to make had been thrown away. Not again, I thought, feeling disheartened. Because, it's unsanitary to let Ralph eat something made hours ago. It has to be freshly made. Suppressing my anger, I spoke to my grinning mother-in-law. I've told you before, right? If you're coming over, let me know the day before. Wasting time and ingredients like this has to stop. That's impossible. I just get the sudden urge to see Ralph's face. She twisted her body. And Ralph loves my cooking. It's a perfect surprise, don't you think? She declared proudly, leaving me too tired to argue further. Of course, Ralph didn't know my cooking was being thrown away. When Ralph got home, his mother eagerly set the table and watched intently as he took his first bite. How's the beef stew today? It's great. I could eat asparagus and pumpkin salad all day. Right? Have as much as you want. She glanced at me with a triumphant look. She's definitely competing with me. I fumed silently as Ralph ate his dinner, unaware of anything. I had confided in my sister-in-law once before. My cheerful and kind sister-in-law had been considerate of me since the beginning of my marriage, knowing how coldly my mother-in-law treated me. I'm sorry. Our mom can be quite unpleasant, can't she? She's always been so obsessed with Ralph. If she ever causes you trouble, feel free to talk to me anytime. She whispered to me during a party after the wedding. So I often vented to her when we ate together. Fortunately, I got pregnant soon after we got married, so my mother-in-law couldn't complain about that. However, her interference with me became even worse. For example, she would come over while I was bedridden with morning sickness and accuse me of just being lazy. Feeling nauseous from morning sickness? It's all in your head. I was completely fine. You're not even sick, don't exaggerate. She'd say, starting with such comments and continuing to nag about my cleaning and ironing skills. Even if you feel bad, you should do your chores perfectly. Ralph is supporting you, isn't he? No, I work full-time too, so we split the chores. Our salaries are almost the same. I protested gently, despite feeling nauseous. My mother-in-law would glare at me. You make him do housework? Then why did you get married? That's ridiculous. No matter how much I explained, it was a dead end. Eventually, I pretended to handle all the housework in front of my mother-in-law to keep the peace. I believe it was deliberate, but my mother-in-law continued to make meals with strong smells or fried food every day. Garlic-heavy steaks, fried chicken, pork cutlets, and the like. Unable to stand the smell of oil filling the house, I would throw up in the bathroom, and when I returned, my mother-in-law would look at me with tearful eyes. Sabrina, how terrible. Do you hate my cooking so much that it makes you throw up? They say pregnancy changes your taste, but this is too much. No, it's the smell of the oil that makes me sick. I'd explain, only for Ralph to scold me too. You can eat even with morning sickness, right? It's disrespectful to waste the food Mom made. I was stunned by his words. He seemed kind, but I realized he lacked empathy. Even after my morning sickness subsided, my mother-in-law would come over to cook dinner for us under the pretense of supporting Sabrina. She would make an enormous amount of food and push it on me. You have a baby, so you need to eat for 3. No, the doctor told me not to gain too much weight. I have a small appetite and avoid fatty meats. I'd gently refuse, only for her to act dramatically sorrowful, as if the world were ending. How awful. I'm thinking of your health, Sabrina. So what if we have fried food every day? Ralph would naturally side with his mother. Mom is trying to be considerate. Can't you see that? She's my mother, so treat her with a bit more respect. Realizing I couldn't reason with them, I resorted to my last option. I asked the doctor to write a letter. Finally, after seeing it, my mother-in-law stopped her food assaults.
After many disputes, the baby was born safely. Even though I had asked not to be disturbed in the hospital, Ralph broke the promise, and my mother-in-law rushed in joyfully right after the birth. My parents had also flown in to see the baby, but my mother-in-law, as usual, put me down.
Oh my, what a wrinkly, ugly child. Looks like a monkey, not cute at all.
My mother-in-law dismissed us with a bored comment, while Ralph responded with a laugh. My parents were wide-eyed. After Ralph saw his mother out to the door, my mom voiced her concern.
She is quite outspoken. Are you okay, Sabrina? Ralph's sister is very kind and helps me out a lot.
I replied with a forced smile.
Don't overdo it, okay? Yeah, thanks.
I felt guilty for worrying my parents, who lived far away. It's common for in-laws to become more intrusive after a grandchild is born. But in our case, it was the opposite. They visited less often. As he grew, our son Mark started to look a lot like me. Fair-skinned, big eyes, and curly hair. My mother-in-law didn't seem to like that and would complain whenever she came over.
That kid has such an ugly hairstyle. He's so pale he looks sick. Doesn't resemble Ralph at all. Is he really your child?
Mom! Ralph finally reprimanded her. But my mother-in-law didn't seem inclined to change her attitude. When we asked her about the baby's party, she coldly replied, "Do it yourselves." After that, even when we went back for holidays, she only doted on Ralph and ignored Mark. When Mark approached her, she looked annoyed, and even when he called her grandma, she didn't seem pleased at all.
Hey, Ralph. Why doesn't your mom show any affection for Mark? He's her grandchild.
When I expressed my sadness, Ralph responded as if it were obvious.
He's not her daughter's child, but her daughter-in-law's. That's just how it is.
I understood his reasoning, but I still wished she would show some affection for Mark, even if only superficially. Ralph never tried to one-up me about income and always shared the housework fairly. If not for my mother-in-law, we would have gotten along perfectly. When Mark turned 2, Ralph was transferred to a different region. I considered going with him, but finding a full-time job with a young child was quite difficult. There were no openings at Ralph's new workplace. When we discussed this at his parents' house, his mother suggested Ralph go alone.
You'll be back in 5 years, right? Then Ralph can go by himself.
I was surprised and looked at her. I expected her to say, as his wife, you should go with him.
Sabrina, you have a job, right? It would be a shame to waste the career you've built. Yes, but Ralph isn't good at cooking, even if he manages other chores.
I'll be fine, Sabrina.
There's a grocery store nearby, so I'll manage my meals.
Ralph said with a smile, so we decided he would go alone. Ralph frequently came back to take Mark to the park, read him bedtime stories, and kept up the communication actively. I also made an effort to visit Ralph with Mark on the weekends, cooking meals and spending quality family time together. But about 6 months later, Ralph suddenly became distant. Even when he came home, he never put his phone down, only giving half-hearted responses when Mark talked to him. When Mark asked, "Daddy, let's play with the train," he would hand her a tablet to watch videos while he smirked at his phone.
Is Daddy tired from work? I was really looking forward to playing with him.
Mark said sadly, which broke my heart. After putting Mark to bed, I confronted Ralph, and for once, he pushed back.
Let me relax when I come home. If you're gonna complain, I won't come back at all. Don't say that. Mark was so looking forward to playing with you.
I pleaded sincerely, but Ralph just made a face and clicked his tongue.
Yeah. I'll play with him next time. Is that good enough?
His dismissive attitude infuriated me, but I held back my anger, worried he'd really stop coming home. This pattern repeated many times over the next year, and both Mark and I began to feel disappointed in Ralph. Then, one day, I got a message from Ralph.
Sorry, I can't come tomorrow.
Tomorrow was Mark's 4th birthday, and we had planned to go to the amusement park as a family.
Did something happen?
I asked, worried, and got a reply. I have to work tomorrow. I won't be back until evening.
If it's work, it can't be helped. We'll celebrate another time.
I replied through the messaging app. On the way home from picking Mark up from daycare, I told her the news, and he was crestfallen.
I wanted to see Daddy, even if just for a moment.
Seeing her on the verge of tears was heart-wrenching. How about we go see him, even if we can't play? I suggested, and Mark's face lit up.
Really?
We'll just say hi and then come back.
Yay!
His excitement made me smile. I decided to surprise Ralph by showing up unannounced. We could meet him after work. Even though he'd been distant lately, surely he'd be happy to see Mark waiting for him outside his place. Suppressing my own excitement, I took Mark on the flight to Ralph's place. We arrived at the closest station and walked to the condo he had rented. As we waited in the park in front of the condo, I heard Ralph's voice from around the corner.
Mark, Daddy's here.
Really? We stepped out onto the sidewalk. I was about to wave at Ralph when I froze. Ralph was holding a boy who looked about 1 year old. Standing beside him was a woman who looked like the boy's mother.
Daddy, I'm hungry. Yeah, I'm hungry too. Let's have Mom's burgers when we get home.
Okay. It was clear they were a family returning from a famous theme park, wearing matching character hats. Ralph turned pale when he noticed me and stopped. The woman beside him also saw me and gasped. She seemed to know Ralph was married. An awkward silence hung between us. After a moment, I broke the silence.
So, you've been having fun here. Sorry to interrupt your happiness. No, it's not what it looks like. There's a deep reason for this.
Ralph stammered.
My mom introduced me to her. She said Linda was better suited for me than Sabrina. I couldn't refuse. So you skipped Mark's birthday celebration to go out with her? Don't be ridiculous. Huh? Was today his birthday?
Ralph's cluelessness disgusted me.
Let's go, Mark.
I took Mark's hand and headed back to the station. I was furious. Not only had he cheated and fathered a secret child, but he also missed his own child's birthday to be with his mistress and the other child. I was boiling with anger. Fine, I'll raise Mark on my own. But I'm not letting this slide. Ralph and his mother. They will pay for this.
Mommy, who was the kid Daddy was holding? Maybe a friend's child?
On the way back, I couldn't tell Mark the truth and just gave her a vague smile.
But that kid called him Daddy. He's my daddy. It's weird.
I held back my tears, barely managing to keep it together. How hurt would Mark be if he knew the truth? I bought some sandwiches on the way. I planned to eat Mark's leftovers, but I had no appetite and threw the rest in the trash along with the bottle. Back home, after putting Mark to bed, I went to the living room and finally let my pent-up emotions out in a flood of tears. I closed the door so as not to wake Mark and cried my heart out. I'd heard stories about husbands cheating during solo assignments, but I never thought it would happen to me. And his reason? My mom recommended it. It made no sense. Unable to sleep, I spent the night thinking. In the morning, during a break at work, I contacted a lawyer to start divorce process.
I'll be filing for child support through a lawyer.
I wrote a note and sent it to Ralph. Once my application was approved, I took paid leave the next day and got a moving estimate. I dropped Mark off at daycare, packed up our things in boxes, and moved to a rental condo I had lined up. It was a temporary place until I could sign a lease for a new house. Ralph sent a barrage of messages, but I read them all without responding. They were all excuses. He didn't seem to plan on apologizing at this point. He also kept calling, but the voicemails he left were just more excuses.
I was lonely. It's hard to say no to my mom. You understand, right? I didn't mean to have a kid with her.
About 6 months passed with no response from me. One day, while Mark and I were playing with toy cars, the doorbell rang. When I checked the intercom screen, there was Ralph, crying. I had told my sister-in-law about the situation recently. Last night, she told me she had given Ralph my new address, so I figured he'd show up soon. On the screen, Ralph's face was a mess of tears and snot. His usually handsome face was ruined. When I let him in, he clung to me, pleading in a tearful voice.
Please, pay the mortgage. If you don't, I'll lose the house by the time I return to the main office.
That sounds tough. I brushed him off, and he glared at me with bloodshot eyes, raising his voice.
Don't talk like it's not your problem. The bank sent a foreclosure notice. If I don't pay, they'll demand the remaining balance in full, and I can't handle that suddenly.
He dropped to his knees, wiping his tears with the back of his hand.
I plan to bring Mom to live with us eventually. Now everything's ruined.
Funny, you swore you wouldn't live with her, I said, shrugging my shoulders. It's not sudden. You must have received several warnings by now.
I thought you'd pay, so I ignored them.
Then it's your own fault, I said coldly, and Ralph lashed out at me.
How did the house end up in my name? I can't pay $4,000 a month on my salary. Foreclosure and auction? That's insane.
Ralph was whining like a child about a natural consequence. There was no other way, I explained calmly. I could have kicked you out, but your mom has a spare key. If you want to keep living there, pay the mortgage. If not, find another place. I can't do that. I promised Linda we'd live in a high-rise condo when I got back. There's no way I can afford a place like that on my salary, he muttered. He's a timid, easily swayed, and vain man, which makes him quite troublesome.
Please, Sabrina, keep paying the mortgage like before.
Ralph begged me.
You've got an inheritance from your grandma, right? You can easily cover the mortgage. Help me out, we're married.
Are you kidding me? I shouted in anger, glaring at Ralph. You cheated on me, had a kid with your mistress, and now you want me to pay the mortgage so you can live with her? How selfish can you be?
Look, I just did what my mom asked. The kid wasn't planned. What was I supposed to do?
He scratched the back of his head, looking sullen. It's your rebellious attitude that makes my mom dislike you, you know?
Shut up. Get out.
I pushed Ralph out of the room and shut the door. Fine. I'll just tell Linda the truth and sell the place, okay? You're so stingy, Sabrina. Ralph cursed under his breath and left. The following weekend, I invited Ralph, his mother, and Linda. I called them to the condo because I had something important to discuss. His mother and Linda arrived, looking around the room with disdain before laughing mockingly. What a shabby place. This tacky condo suits her perfectly. Come on, Linda, don't say it out loud, even if it's true.
Hey, cut it out.
Ignoring their giggles, I deliberately addressed Ralph. By the way, I'm glad we sold the house we used to live in. Paying $4,000 a month was tough. I was considering buying it back myself. Hearing this, his mother and Linda looked shocked. Clearly, Ralph had kept this from them.
What? I thought Ralph was paying for it. No, you see, Sabrina has an inheritance.
Oh, that's right. You married her for the money, didn't you? Linda sneered. Did you know that, Sabrina? The only reason Ralph married you was because of your inheritance. Don't think it was because of your charm. I shifted my gaze from Linda to Ralph, who looked away, confirming her words. I wasn't hurt anymore. My opinion of Ralph couldn't sink any lower. So, why did you call us here? Linda and Ralph are busy, unlike you. Ralph should know the reason best. It's about child support payments. You received the letter, right? Ralph's face twitched.
Oh, that.
It's been 6 months since the divorce, and you keep dodging the issue. You even missed our scheduled meetings. I will be taking this to civil court soon. Despite my stern tone, Ralph grinned.
I'm still negotiating the amount with my lawyer. Just give me a bit more time. Is that all?
No, let's get to the main point. I fixed my gaze on his mother, who yawned in boredom and asked firmly. "Ralph, I heard you met Linda through you. Is that true?" My mother-in-law raised her chin, answering with annoyance. "Yes, it's true." "Why would you do such a thing?" "Because I hate you, obviously." She sneered, spitting out her words. Even though I expected this answer, the bluntness still hurt. Ignoring my feelings, she continued her verbal attack. "Your kid is ugly like you and doesn't warm up to me at all. If you shoo him away like a stray dog whenever he tries to talk to you, of course he won't warm up to you." She ignored my protest and smirked at Linda. "When I met Linda at the store where Ralph works, I thought she was a better match for him. Ralph is amazing, so I didn't mind that he was married." "No kidding." Ralph laughed awkwardly but quickly stopped when he met my eyes. I took a deep breath and muttered with frustration. Ralph is at fault for having an affair, but what kind of parent encourages their child to cheat? If I don't like the wife, it's only natural to find someone better. She said this as if it were obvious. But I told him to hurry up and get divorced, and he hesitated because Mark was young. My mother-in-law sighed as if Ralph was the unreasonable one. I started to question if I was the one in the wrong. Then, emboldened, Linda spoke up smugly. "It's weird to leave your husband alone. You should have moved in with him." "Yeah, exactly." Ralph leaned forward, gaining confidence from their support. "It's Sabrina's fault for not coming with me. A wife should quit her job and follow her husband. Men are sensitive. If you leave them alone, of course they'll cheat." I was speechless. Ralph had such outdated views? "Your mom told me not to move. She said it would be a waste to lose my career. I was testing your loyalty. A good wife would have gone anyway." "I definitely would have," Linda added, grinning. "Basically, Ralph and I are meant to be together." "Funny, I thought you felt that way about your ex-husband," I said, showing a photo, and Linda's smile vanished. "Quite cozy with him, considering you were seeing Ralph at the time." "What?" Ralph and his mother were shocked. "Linda, you've been married before? You said you were single." Ralph and his mother looked at the photo I showed them and turned pale. No wonder. It showed Linda and a man getting cozy and entering a hotel together. Linda panicked, hastily trying to explain. "I was shopping with a friend, felt sick, so we rested at a hotel. That's all. There's no proof we did anything." There was no proof, but her high-pitched, desperate tone was as good as an admission. "That child is definitely Ralph's, right? Did you get a DNA test?" Linda's shoulders jumped. "We don't need that. Of course, he's Ralph's kid." Ralph suddenly remembered something. "When we checked the blood type, it was A. It's a type we couldn't have, but the nurse said it might change, so I was relieved." Watching Linda tremble, Ralph sighed. "We should probably get a DNA test." "Yeah, Ralph." Linda choked up. Then suddenly, she shifted her anger towards me, shouting, "Why do you have these photos? This is absurd. They're fake. They're real. I hired a detective." The door opened, and Ralph's sister walked in. Ralph and his mother stared at her, mouths agape. "What are you doing here?" "What?" "I heard everyone would be here today. After putting Mark to bed, I listened from the next room." She gave Ralph and his mother a brief glare, then turned to Linda with a smile. "Long time no see. Since you broke off my engagement by stealing my fiancé?" "So, you're Ralph's sister?" Linda glared at her, frustration clear on her face. "He dumped both of us and ran off, right? It's over." "Yes, but the fallout isn't." Ralph's sister spoke to Linda with intimidating authority. "You always want what belongs to others." Pathetic. With her arms crossed, she turned to Ralph and their mother. "Mom, Ralph, it's pitiful how you're letting this woman manipulate you. Treat Sabrina better." Her disappointed tone made Ralph look down awkwardly, but his mother pouted and snapped back. "Linda is better for Ralph. She's younger, cuter, and a better conversationalist." Ralph's mother, whining like a spoiled child, suddenly realized something.
If that kid isn't my grandchild, I've been giving money to someone else's kid? What? Mom, you've been giving her money?
Ralph and his sister confronted her.
How much?
With a timid glance at Ralph and his sister, their mother confessed in a barely audible voice.
Around $40,000. $40,000!
I shouted involuntarily. Ralph and his sister recoiled in shock.
You've got to be kidding! Oh my!
Ralph checked his phone with a sudden realization and groaned.
Mom, did you use my card without asking?
Well, I live on a pension.
I don't have that kind of money.
Their mother replied defiantly.
I thought it was okay since it's your kid. Why didn't you talk to me about it?
Linda told me to keep it a secret from you. Ralph slumped, staring at his phone. His sister ran her hands through her hair in frustration. Meanwhile, Linda, who had quietly packed up, was sneaking towards the door. Ralph's sister called after her.
You're not getting away this time. You're gonna pay for this and my alimony.
Yeah, we'll be taking this to court. Get ready. Linda fled without a word. Ralph and his mother tried to follow, but his sister grabbed them by their collars and dragged them back for a few hours of stern lecturing. A DNA test on Linda's child confirmed he wasn't Ralph's. Enraged, Ralph's mother had squandered his salary, and their debts had only worsened. Most of Ralph's paycheck went to paying off his mother's debts, and later, he came to me in tears.
Can you waive the child support? Please. You work full-time, so you can manage without it, right? If you have any inheritance left, could you share some? We're still supposed to help each other out, right?
I hung up the call that came during my work break without listening to the end. How dare he make such an audacious request? I had my lawyer send a letter stating, if you continue to resist, we'll garnish your wages, and finally, child support were deposited into my account. Ralph and his mother had always been somewhat dependent on each other, but Ralph has recently started distancing himself due to her excessive spending. Lonely, his mother caused a big commotion by chasing him to his new condo, which ended up involving the police. Their relationship is beyond repair. With payments to Ralph's sister, Linda was overwhelmed with debt, leaving her child with her parents and working around the clock. Years of living off others' money had finally caught up with her. I no longer have to deal with Ralph or his mother's antics. Cutting ties with Ralph, I feel a great sense of relief and enjoy my days. Since our separation happened while Ralph was away, Mark doesn't fully grasp what divorce means. I've only told her that we won't be living with Daddy or seeing Grandma anymore. I'll explain everything when she starts school. For now, he's cheerful and thriving, which is a great comfort. Although Ralph and I are no longer connected, Mark still has her bond with him. If he ever wants to see him, I'll let him. From now on, I'll focus on Mark's growth and be there for his every step of the way.
This is a souvenir to thank you for looking after my daughter for a year.
My sister Sana, who had just returned from a year-long world cruise with her husband, said something shocking.
Thanks for taking care of my daughter for a year. We had a great time because of you.
So, where is she? I couldn't understand what my sister was talking about. If it was a long trip, wouldn't you normally take your child with you? I asked, surprised.
Huh? What do you mean by child? I don't know anything about that. What? I left her at the front door.
Left her child at my front door? Why would she do that? Even if she did, I didn't know about it. I had no memory of seeing Sana's child.
I don't understand.
It's hard to believe, but my selfish sister apparently left her daughter at my front door when they departed for their cruise, expecting me to take care of her for the entire year. This thoughtless act of my sister led to a serious situation. Naturally, my sister turned pale with realization at what she had done. My name is Mary, and I'm 26 years old. A few years ago, I met my husband in a social club and got married. Fortunately, my husband is a serious and hardworking man, and despite these tough times, we're living comfortably. To support my busy husband, I quit my job and became a housewife after we got married. Currently, we don't have children. Even after 2 years of marriage, we haven't been blessed with a child. Still, we enjoy our time together and help each other, living happily. I have a sister, Sana, who is 2 years younger than me. Sana has a selfish streak, and my serious personality always got dragged around by her whims. Our parents were worried about her and often scolded her, but she never listened and rebelled since childhood. Sana lived as she pleased, dropped out of college on a whim, and eloped with her classmate, John. My sister, who acts without thinking and always causes trouble for our parents. After eloping, Sana was missing for several years. One day, she suddenly showed up at our house holding a baby. "Hey Mary, long time no see. Do you remember me?" Even though it had been years, she still looked the same as before.
Sana? Where have you been? We were all worried. How did you even find my place? Come in, I want to hear everything.
Once inside, she explained that the baby was her child with John, the guy she eloped with, and they got married. I was curious about how Sana, who was lazy and never helped around the house, managed her life after dropping out of college. Years had passed, and now that she was married with a child, I wondered if she had become more responsible.
John and I are getting by with part-time jobs. We didn't plan for the baby, but we have to take care of her.
It's such a drag. She's always crying. Since dropping out and running away, John had been working part-time, but their income was unstable, so Sana also reluctantly started working. Both of them had part-time jobs, but I wondered how they managed with a baby. I hoped that becoming a parent had made Sana grow as a person. I wanted to believe that despite her complaints, she was taking care of her child properly. Given how selfish she is, I doubted she could handle it while working part-time.
It must be tough with such a small child.
I asked cautiously.
I hate not having any time for myself.
You don't have kids, right?
Your house is nice, and you seem to be living well.
I didn't know how she found out, but Sana knew my husband and I didn't have children. Yes, it's just me and my husband now. He's busy with work, so I'm a housewife.
That's what I wanted to check. You don't have kids and you're a housewife, so you must have plenty of time.
I thought I saw a sly smile on my sister's face.
Dad and Mom are worried about you. Now that you have a child, why not visit them and apologize for all the trouble you caused?
No way.
I never want to see those annoying people again. They'll just lecture me all over again.
Maybe she really hated being raised strictly, but she had no intention of reconciling with our parents. From my perspective as her older sister, she was sloppy, selfish, and never listened to anyone. Plus, she was boy crazy. With a sister like this, our parents had no choice but to be strict, which made them nag a lot. No matter what anyone said, she never reflected on her actions. Instead, she always found a way to escape and act cunningly.
So Mary, count on you when I'm in trouble. You're the only one I can rely on.
She left with a sweet tone, but when she asked for help, it reminded me of how she used to drag me around, giving me a bad feeling. That bad feeling came true in the worst way. One day, I came back from shopping and heard a baby crying from the front door. In a panic, I approached and recognized the baby immediately.
It's Sana's child.
I was confused as to why Sana's child was at my doorstep. I quickly called Sana. When she answered, she only said one thing.
I have something to do, so take care of her.
She hung up without giving any reason, leaving me in a daze. I couldn't just leave the baby at the door, so I decided to take care of her until Sana contacted me again.
Sana, you should at least explain why. Dropping off a baby suddenly is shocking. It's a good thing I was able to reach you. I was worried something might have happened.
I muttered complaints in my mind while soothing the baby and waiting for Sana. After some time, Sana finally showed up. She was dressed in a flashy, revealing outfit that was popular among young people, totally inappropriate for a mother.
What's with that outfit? Where were you, leaving a baby behind?
Angrily, I questioned Sanaa about her reckless behavior.
I was having lunch with friends.
She shamelessly answered, not showing any guilt.
You left your baby at my door just for that? What if something happened to her? Well, if I had asked first, you might have said no. Besides, nothing happened, right?
It's fine.
You're home all day anyway, so you must have time.
Sanaa's selfishness hadn't changed. Without our parents' supervision, it seemed to have gotten worse. Even as a housewife, I wasn't just sitting around doing nothing. I became a housewife to support my busy husband.
I get that you want to have fun, but now that you're a parent, you need to think about your child.
I was worried that a parent who prioritized having fun could safely raise a child, so I tried to be firm with her, but Sanaa argued back.
I was giving you a chance to experience taking care of a child since you don't have one.
You should be grateful. She dodged my concerns with excuses. It was no use. She didn't understand that what she did was wrong.
Didn't you find your blood-related niece adorable?
I'll let you babysit her occasionally. She even acted like she was doing me a favor. No wonder our parents struggled with her. Sanaa would use any trick to get others to do what she wanted, just to make her own life easier. The conversation went nowhere, and the day ended. Realizing that I couldn't abandon the baby, Sanaa started to take advantage and leave her baby with me more often. I had no idea where she was going, but she frequently dropped off the baby and went out. It was less like babysitting and more like she was dumping the child on me. What on earth was her husband, John, doing? Did he know she was leaving their child like this? Regardless, I was also troubled by this, and I complained to Sanaa many times, but she just brushed it off. It was hard to believe her nerve, but I kept trying to persuade her.
I have my own things to do, and I might not even notice if you leave the baby without saying anything. Please, don't leave her like that. I don't mind helping occasionally, but don't treat it like it's a given.
Then, suddenly, Sanaa stopped visiting. Maybe she finally understood after all my efforts.
Recently, Sanaa hasn't come by to leave her baby. Maybe my persistence paid off, and she reconsidered.
I thought Sanaa had finally turned over a new leaf and was seriously taking care of her child. Finally, she understood. I optimistically believed she was handling things herself. Time passed peacefully, and I stopped thinking about my sister. Nearly a year went by. Then one day, Sanaa showed up alone, smiling, after almost a year.
Hey Mary, long time no see. Sanaa? It's been a while. What have you been up to? I've had a great time for the past year. I miss the air here in the States. Let me in, and I'll tell you all about it.
When she visited, she told me she and her husband, John, had been enjoying a year-long world cruise together. She talked proudly about how fun the cruise was, sharing stories about the countries they visited, the good things about those places, and the delicious food they had. Since they were traveling as a couple, I assumed they took their child with them. That's why there was no news from them for a year, I thought. Sanaa gave me several unusual souvenirs from overseas. And then,
this is a thank you gift for looking after my daughter for a year.
She said something shocking.
Thanks for taking care of my daughter for a whole year.
Where is she? I couldn't understand what my sister was saying. If they were traveling as a couple, wouldn't they naturally take their child with them?
Huh? What are you talking about? I don't know anything about that.
What?
You left her at my front door.
Even hearing that, I had no idea what she was talking about. I didn't remember seeing her child at all.
I don't understand.
It was hard to believe, but apparently, they had left their child at my front door when they departed for their year-long cruise, intending for me to take care of her all that time. I had warned her about the dangers of leaving a child like that, and now my worst fear had come true. Thinking back, if they went on the cruise for a year, they must have left around this time last year. Around this time last year, I remember getting a message from a friend about my high school teacher's retirement celebration. I went back to my hometown to celebrate with friends. And my husband was on a business trip, so neither of us were home. It must have been then. Sana left her child at my door when no one was home.
We need to call the police right away.
The child might have been taken by someone with bad intentions. Panicking, I prepared to call the police.
Wait!
Sana raised her voice in a panic.
If you do that, it'll become a big deal. We don't need to involve the police. We can find her ourselves.
Even though this was a serious matter, Sana was strangely opposed to calling the police.
What are you talking about? Your child is missing. We need to find her quickly. Let's look for her ourselves first. We'll find her soon, I'm sure.
Desperately, Sana tried to stop me.
If we call the police, I might get arrested.
Sana was afraid that her actions might lead to criminal charges, so she begged me to look for the child without involving the police. With her child missing and the police getting involved, Sana finally realized the gravity of what she had done. She didn't know what had happened to her child. She didn't even know if she was safe. Even in this situation, Sana was only thinking about saving herself. She was unbelievably selfish.
I warned you it was dangerous. But you ignored me, over and over, irresponsibly. No normal parent would abandon their child like that.
This was the result of her selfish actions. I was so angry.
Dumping your child on someone else just so you can go out and have fun? That makes you an unfit mother. Where did you go, dressed like that? I'm gonna talk to your husband, John.
Talking to Sana was getting nowhere. I decided to involve her husband, John.
Don't do that. Seriously, it's a hassle. John has nothing to do with this. I'll talk to him myself, so don't meddle.
Sana freaked out when I mentioned John's name. I was taken aback by her reaction.
Why are you so anxious? Does John even know that you've been leaving your child with me repeatedly?
Realizing she had revealed too much, Sana took a deep breath and said,
Mary, you're freaking out too much. It's kind of funny how desperate you are. Calm down a bit.
She tried to deflect with a sneer, but she was clearly rattled. Something was off. I was suggesting reasonable actions to resolve the situation, but Sana was desperately trying to stop me. With a child missing, talking to her husband John seemed natural, but her reaction was odd. Was she hiding something from John?
I don't know if you'll get arrested, but your child is missing. She might have been kidnapped. We need to find her first. We can't do this without the police. Do you even care if I get arrested? I'm your sister. How could you be so cruel?
Worried about the child's safety, I insisted on going to the police, but Sana kept stopping me, fearing arrest.
Fine. For now, I'll hold off, but you need to talk to John.
I said that for now, but I didn't trust Sana. She seemed to be hiding something, fearing John's reaction to the missing child, or maybe there was another reason. Seeing how she wanted to keep this from John, I wondered if there was abuse at home, but I couldn't be sure. Sana wanted to look for her child on our own. But we didn't have time for that. I really wanted to talk to John, but given Sana's reaction, it seemed difficult, and he might be as uncooperative as her. I decided to talk to the police without telling Sana. The child had been missing for a year. There was no point in searching blindly. We needed the police's help. So, I explained to the police that my sister had left her child at my front door before leaving on a trip, and the child had gone missing.
I can't believe your sister did that.
The police took the situation seriously and acted quickly. I cooperated as much as possible to help the investigation move forward. The police searched desperately, and after a while, I got a call saying they had found the baby. I was deeply relieved that she was safe. I was glad I didn't listen to Sana and went to the police. According to the police, a neighbor had noticed the crying baby at our front door a year ago and took her in. They had reported it to Child Protective Services. And the baby had been placed in a foster care facility. The baby had been growing up healthily at the facility. All of this had happened while my husband and I were away, so we had no way of knowing. Sana's selfish actions had involved the police and child services, causing a big commotion, but the baby was safely found.
I found your child.
I reported to Sana. I didn't mention the police. I just said that a neighbor had found the baby and reported it to child services, who had taken care of her.
Wow, Mary. You really are different, having so much free time as a housewife. Thanks for finding her.
She was as carefree as ever.
Is John not home? I wanted to see him. John's working a part-time job today. His pay's low, so he has to work a lot. It's better when my husband is busy and away. It's easier for me, too.
Sana seemed relieved to have the baby back, oblivious to the fact that we had involved the police and all the trouble we went through. Then she muttered to herself,
"Thank goodness. Now John won't find out. If he knew about this, it would be a disaster."
Sana clearly had a secret she didn't want John to know.
With the baby back and John kept in the dark about this, everything's fine.
Despite the serious situation, Sana remained carefree. She seemed to think that everything was fine as long as it ended well. She had always lived by avoiding anything inconvenient to her. I handed the child back to Sana and left her house. But this wasn't the end of the story. One day, someone knocked on Sana's door.
"Who is it?"
Looking outside, I saw the police. Because I had reported the child missing, the police had come to Sana's place on suspicion of child abandonment. Unaware of this, Sana panicked at the sudden appearance of the police.
"The police? I didn't do anything wrong."
She turned pale. I stepped forward from behind the officers. The police had asked me to accompany them when they visited Sana's house. So I had come with them to see her.
"Why are you here with the police, Mary? Did you tell them about the child? I told you not to make a fuss."
Sana started to get angry, but I continued.
"What are you talking about? The child went missing a year ago. There's no way we could have found her by ourselves."
Sana glared at me resentfully.
"Sana, give it up. This situation is too serious. You need to atone for your actions and reflect on what you did."
I realized that it was beyond my ability to reform Sana. This was a serious incident that could have cost a life. It broke my heart, but I couldn't let my sister get away with it. Cornered, Sana pointed at me and said something unbelievable. "No, it was Mary. She kidnapped my child because she wanted one for herself." She was trying to pin the blame on me. My sister, who had abandoned her child to go out and have fun, was now accusing me, the one who had found her child, of being the kidnapper. I was stunned by her audacity. However, the police, who had heard everything from me and knew Sana's character, said with exasperation,
"If you don't admit your guilt, your punishment will be more severe. It was Mary who kidnapped her. What did I do wrong? Do you have any proof that I did anything?"
"We do have proof.
The security camera caught you leaving the child at the front door."
In fact, the police had already seen the footage from the security camera I had installed, showing Sana leaving the baby at our front door. Because of Sana's past behavior, I had installed the camera for extra security.
"What? I didn't know about that. That's an invasion of privacy."
Sana started to get angry upon hearing she had been recorded. At that moment, John came home from his part-time job. He looked shocked. It was understandable, given that the police were there and his wife Sana was causing a scene. "What is going on here?" he asked, looking puzzled at Sana.
"Well, there's a reason for this. Hi, I'm Mary, Sana's sister."
I tried to explain the situation to John, who clearly didn't understand what was happening.
"Wait, let me explain."
"Sana, be quiet." I stopped her because she had tried to frame me. There was no telling what she might say to John. I stopped Sana, who was yelling and trying to interrupt, and continued to speak. I explained that Sana had abandoned her child at our house. The child had been missing for a year, the police found her, and now Sana was facing charges of child abandonment.
"This can't be true. That's not what I heard. Sana told me that her sister and her husband happily took care of our child. Why did you do this?"
Struggling to raise a child on a part-time income, John had believed that my husband and I, with our stable income, were taking care of their child.
We had no choice. John, your part-time job doesn't pay enough, and I'm too busy to look after the baby. If you were so hard up that you couldn't take care of your child, how did you afford a year-long world cruise?
John's face changed color. Sana looked like she realized she had made a mistake. John turned red with anger. What is this about a world cruise? When Sana had visited us before with souvenirs, she mentioned the trip, but John seemed completely unaware of it.
I had my suspicions, Sana. You go out late at night, wearing revealing clothes. What's going on? Well, who did you go on that world cruise with? Tell me the truth. If you don't, I'll find out soon enough.
Overwhelmed by John's intensity, Sana couldn't come up with her usual excuses and began to confess.
The truth is, I was having an affair with a guy. I lied to you, John, and went on the trip with my lover.
To my surprise, Sana had gone on the world cruise not with her husband John but with her lover, Harry. The flashy clothes she often wore were for her dates with Harry. Sana had used me to dump her child so she could have secret dates with her lover. John had believed her lies, which is why he didn't notice her absence for a year.
Sana told me she was going home to take care of her sick father. She said he was seriously ill and wouldn't be back for a year.
Her father is perfectly healthy. I saw him recently, and he's doing just fine.
Sana hasn't gone near her parents for years. How could she lie about taking care of them?
John was stunned. It was understandable. His wife, who he thought was caring for her sick father, had actually been traveling the world with another man.
I'm sorry, John. I love you, but I also fell for Harry's kindness.
As a bartender, Harry was paid to be kind to his customers, but Sana had fallen for his act.
At first, we only met at the club. Then we started dating outside, and before I knew it, we were in deep. How long have you been involved with this bartender? I always thought the child didn't look like me. Could it be?
I'm sorry. Sana broke down in tears.
The truth is, Harry is the father of the child.
It was chaos. The child was not John's, but the result of Sana's affair with Harry. That explained her behavior when the child went missing. She was terrified of John finding out about the affair. John was speechless from the shock.
I can't raise a child that's not mine. We're getting divorced. Go raise the child with that guy. Please forgive me. I really love you, John. Harry was just a fling. I don't care. We're done.
Furious, John threw Sana out of the house. All of this happened because of Sana's selfishness. It was her own fault. Sana broke down in tears again.
You need to come with us to the station.
Sana was then taken away by the police. She was arrested on charges of child abandonment. She was prosecuted and found guilty. John could not forgive Sana for having a child with her lover and for being arrested. He sent her divorce papers. San thought that she would do well and that we would never find out, but her plans went awry.
My husband found out about the affair and is divorcing me. I got arrested over the incident with the child. Now, you're all I have left.
Harry sighed inwardly. Please wait for me to get out of jail, and then we can be together and create a happy family for our child, Sana pleaded, but to Harry, she was just a client and a casual fling. Fed up with the trouble caused by Sana's reckless actions, Harry abandoned her and their child, disappearing without a trace. Left to fend for herself, Sana had to rely on her parents, whom she had previously despised, as she couldn't support her child on her part-time job alone. Her parents took her in and began to strictly discipline her. As time passed and the incident faded, I noticed a change in my own health. Thinking I might be pregnant, I went to the hospital and my suspicions were confirmed. When I told my husband, he was overjoyed. Despite his busy work schedule, he helped with house chores and took care of me. The following year, I gave birth to our much-anticipated first child. Now, we live happily as a family of 3. No longer troubled by my sister and enjoying peaceful days.
How's the infertility treatment going? Oh, wait, you don't even have a partner anymore, so what's the point of doing infertility treatment?
The one who said those terrible words at the company's anniversary party was my ex-husband Ken, who looked down on me for being infertile, had a child with his affair partner, and then dumped me out of the blue.
That's a pretty harsh thing to say just because we broke up. Oh, is this the infamous infertile lady?
Yeah, that's her. My ex-wife, who couldn't even fulfill her role as a woman. The two of them started laughing at me. If that's the attitude you're gonna take, then I've got something to say too.
So, how are things going for you? How's work? Of course things are going great. After all, it's me we're talking about. Oh, really? That's great to hear. But you might not be able to say that after tomorrow.
Huh?
What do you mean?
When I told my ex-husband the truth, his face turned pale. My name is Kelly Smith. I work for a cosmetics company. I married Ken when I was 32. It is considered a bit late by most people's standards. The main reason I didn't get married until I was 32 was probably because I was working too much. I started my current job when I graduated college at 22. Back then, I was desperate to be recognized quickly. I've always been competitive and had a much higher drive to improve than most people. I volunteered for big projects and worked hard. And that gave me the energy to live. I often traveled all over the country for work, had no time to play, and sometimes worked from morning till midnight without a break. It might sound like a terrible company, but I loved my job and never felt it was a burden. However, people around me would disguise their criticism as concern, saying things like, "You need to get married soon, or you won't be able to have kids. Do you really enjoy working so much, and a life dedicated to work doesn't sound fun?" Honestly, I was fed up. Everyone has their own values, so I'd rather be left alone, but if I argue back, I'll just get more nagging. Whenever this kind of talk came up, I would force a smile and quickly leave. Having poured most of my life into my work, I managed to get a decent position at a young age in the company. I finally started getting regular breaks and had some leisure time in my personal life. By this time, I was already 32 years old. At this point, I had been single for 15 years. I didn't have a strong desire to get married, but the idea of being single forever was a bit sad. I hoped to meet a good partner someday. That's when I met my husband, Ken. We both loved reading and met at a book event for a popular author. Since the author was well known, there was a long line, and the wait was quite lengthy. Ken, who was standing behind me, started talking to me out of boredom. "It's quite a wait, isn't it? Do you often come to these events?" "Yeah, it's been about 30 minutes. This is my first time, Egg. I happen to have the day off from work." "Really? Me too. It's my first time as well. By the way, which of the novels is your favorite?" "Well, I think I liked that novel in 2013 the best." "Me too. It's my favorite novel." Ken talked with sparkling eyes. We hit it off, chatting enthusiastically about how moving certain lines were or how surprising the ending was. While talking to Ken, my turn to get a signature came up quickly. As we were about to leave after getting our books signed, Ken said, "I had a great time talking with you today. If you don't mind, could I get your contact info?" Thinking it was fate, I gladly agreed, and we made plans to meet again. Our first date was filled with lively conversation, and I had a really fun time. As we went on more dates, I got to know Ken better. He was 5 years younger than me and worked in sales at a cosmetics company, just like me. However, he liked to keep work and private life separate, so he didn't want to talk much about work in his personal time. I felt the same way. It was nice that we had a shared hobby, and we had a lot in common, such as being only children and not having been in a relationship for a long time. I felt a sense of closeness with him. Gradually, I started feeling at ease around Ken. He had a bit of an airhead side and often forgot things, but I found that part of him endearing and cute, fitting for someone younger. For someone who hadn't had any time to play before, dating Ken was refreshing and fun. I was quite excited about being in a relationship again after so long. About 6 months after meeting Ken, he said, "I want you to meet my parents."
What?
"I want to marry you, Kelly. Is that okay?" Although I was surprised by the sudden proposal, I loved Ken and had no reason to refuse. The discussion progressed quickly, and I agreed to meet his parents. "You're really beautiful. I never thought I'd see the day Ken would introduce a girlfriend. He must really like you. I'm happy to see Ken so happy. Please take care of him." Ken's kind parents showered me with compliments, making me feel both happy and embarrassed. Ken, looking proud, said, "She doesn't look 5 years older than me, right? She's a beauty." It might have sounded a bit rude, but I knew Ken meant it as a compliment. I was relieved that the meeting with his parents went smoothly. Life with Ken was peaceful and calm. However, changes were coming our way. "Kelly, don't you want to have kids?" Ken asked hesitantly, probably mindful of my age, as I was already 35. Kids. Of course, I didn't dislike children, and I did want to become a mother someday. But at my age, pregnancy and childbirth come with higher risks. Seeing me at a loss for words, Ken looked worried and said, "Is it not okay? Your health comes first, Kelly. If you think it's too much, we can stop any time." Then he pulled out a bunch of brochures for fertility clinics from his bag and showed them to me. Ken, who usually wasn't good at researching things, had gone to great lengths because he really wanted kids. He had carefully selected the information with me in mind. Seeing my husband like this made me want to have our child for him too. That's how I started feeling. "No, it's not bad. Yeah, let's start trying for a baby." "Really? Thank you. Let's do our best." The next week, we went to the hospital and had thorough examinations. The results were to come later, with about a week in between. During that time, we were both a bit restless. Finally, the test results came in.
I'm basically fine. They just said I need to get a rubella vaccination.
I see. As for me, they said I have polycystic ovary syndrome.
What's that?
It means I have more eggs than most people, which makes ovulation and getting pregnant harder. My husband became visibly downcast and stopped responding. His feelings were easy to read. Seeing him like that, I hurried to reassure him. "Oh, but you know, they said a lot of people have this condition. With hormone treatment to make it easier to ovulate, we have a good chance of getting pregnant." "Thank goodness. So, we'll start treatment from now on." I was a bit downcast hearing about my ovulation issues, but I was relieved to hear that pregnancy was still possible. So, we started hormone treatment and officially began trying for a baby. Given my age, we decided to try timing-based methods a few times, and if that didn't work, we'd move on to artificial insemination or IVF. However, even after 3 months of carefully timing things as advised by the doctor, I still wasn't pregnant. I wonder what's wrong.
It's okay. They say being pessimistic is the worst thing. Let's take it easy and not rush.
Yeah, you're right. At first, he encouraged me like this and was very supportive, even driving me to and from the hospital. But as 6 months passed, things began to change. My in-laws started expressing their desire for grandchildren. It began with a phone call from my mother-in-law. "Hey, Kelly. I don't mean to be rude, but you're over 30 now, right? Are you thinking about having kids? We've started fertility treatment, but it's not going well." I see. Sorry for being insensitive since you're already seeing a doctor. But you know, Ken has always been an only child and felt lonely, so he needs at least 2 kids. Do it for him and for us. With that, she hung up the phone. Even though my mother-in-law only had 1 child, she should understand how hard it is to have siblings. It's difficult enough to have just 1 child. The following month and the month after that, she continued to express her desire to see her grandchild. When I was alone, I would let out a deep sigh. I talked to my husband about how his mom was pressuring me for a grandchild, but he just laughed it off. Mom said that? Well, I guess it can't be helped. You're getting older, Kelly, so she's probably worried. If we have a baby soon, that should solve everything. He might not have meant any harm, but his words pierced my heart. Despite this, we continued trying for a baby for a while, but there was no sign of pregnancy. My husband seemed to lose interest. He started coming home late, claiming he had to work overtime, instead of coming home early for our efforts. We had agreed to avoid drinking alcohol, but he soon broke that promise too. On top of that, he seemed to think there was no point in trying if I couldn't get pregnant, so our intimacy decreased significantly. It became an environment where having a child was impossible, creating a vicious cycle. Still, I couldn't give up on having a child. I decided to do everything I could to prepare my body for pregnancy while waiting for my husband to cooperate again. I started drinking warm drinks every morning to warm my body, taking supplements, exercising moderately, and being careful with my diet. At the clinic, they gave me specific instructions on when to come, saying, "Come after your next period," so I kept up with my appointments alone. Then the doctor said, "I'd like to move to the next stage soon, so could you come with your husband next time?" I wondered if he would come with me. Feeling a bit anxious, I decided to talk to him.
Hey, Ken. The doctor wants to move to the next step and wants us both to come in for a discussion.
The next step?
The next step is artificial insemination. Your mom is also eager for a grandchild, and I'm getting older. We should follow the doctor's advice and start artificial insemination as soon as possible. Can you come to the hospital with me next time?
Do I have to go too? That's such a hassle. Wait, did he just say it's a hassle? All you have to do is listen, while I'm the one undergoing all the procedures and injections. That's so unfair. And couldn't you tell your mom to stop pressuring me about grandchildren? That would help reduce my stress a bit. Anger welled up inside me, and I wasn't sure where to start. I stayed silent with a frown on my face. Noticing my reaction, my husband tried to calm me down. I was just joking, don't get mad. I'll think about the dates, okay? But days went by, and he didn't make any plans to go to the hospital. When I asked, "How about this day?" he always found an excuse to avoid it. "Do you really want a child? You seemed so eager before, so why are you suddenly refusing?" Feeling overwhelmed with anxiety, I realized I had to confront him directly.
Hey, are you planning to stop trying for a baby?
He crossed his arms in thought for a moment. Well, yeah. Honestly, I'm too busy with work right now. I'm sorry, but can we stop trying for a baby for now? I couldn't stay silent anymore. All the money we've spent on fertility treatments, all the pain I've endured, are we going to waste it all? Are we going to give up so soon? We don't have time to waste. I had so much to say.
But I'm already 35. The older I get, the higher the risks for both pregnancy and childbirth. And your mom keeps calling me about having a grandchild. What am I supposed to do?
I spoke quickly, my anger spilling over. Kelly, you're just stressing too much. Ignore my mom. We're stopping this for now.
Are we really stopping? After all the effort we've put in?
It's not my fault, is it? If you weren't infertile, we'd have kids by now and my mom would be happy. As he started to walk away, I quickly called out, "Wait a minute." He turned around and said, "What's your problem? Are you that frustrated? Why are you so persistent? Oh, I heard there are special services for women now. If you're that frustrated, go there. I won't be mad." With those awful and crude words, he left. Tears of frustration and anger rolled down my cheeks. With him talking like that, I couldn't bring up trying for a baby or children again. So, our attempts to conceive naturally came to an end. My mother-in-law kept calling, asking about grandchildren, but I dodged her questions and made excuses. Eventually, she stopped calling. probably realizing it was hopeless. Between Ken and me, the topic of children became taboo, and we stopped discussing it altogether. Our relationship changed after we stopped trying for a baby. Ken seemed distant and uninterested in me. "Why are you so cold?" I asked him one day, and his response shocked me. "I'm busy with my new job." "Didn't I tell you?"
What? New job? You never told me.
"Oh, I guess I only mentioned being busy." I was stunned to learn he had changed jobs without telling me. We had agreed before marriage to keep work and private life separate, so we didn't talk about work at home. But still, I thought he could have at least mentioned it. Yet, being married doesn't mean we have to share everything, and luckily, we didn't have kids. We kept our finances separate, so nothing changed for me personally. So, I decided to let it go. I was curious about where my husband had changed jobs to and whether his salary had changed, but I decided not to ask. I thought it would be better for both of us that way. However, his job change ended up causing an unexpected situation, but I wouldn't realize that until later. A few months passed. One day at work, the head of the HR department approached me. "Isn't this your husband, Kelly?" he asked.
What?
Looking at the resume, I saw a profile of my husband.
That's definitely my husband. It looks like he's been working at the branch for a little while now. Did you introduce him to this company? No, not at all. I knew he changed jobs, but I had no idea it was for our company.
Different branches, different roles, and I didn't know anyone at Ken's branch. Our company has over 3,000 employees nationwide. It's not unusual to not notice when someone new joins if they're not at the same branch. I happened to find out because of my position, but Ken probably had no idea. I was shocked that such a thing could happen. But thinking about it, it's not surprising that he ended up at our company, as it's one of the larger cosmetics companies in the area where we live.
I have some concerns about this person.
I couldn't believe my ears.
My husband did that. Aren't you going to talk to your husband about this?
For now, let's keep it a secret from the people at his branch. I don't want anyone to act weird around him.
Got it.
I asked the HR head to keep my husband's employment a secret. I planned to tell my husband when I got home. Thinking about this, I headed home. When I got home, my husband wasn't back yet. It was 8 p.m. He's late. I thought as I waited for my husband to come home. Then, I received a message from him. "There's a welcome party tonight, so I'll be late." I figured it couldn't be helped and replied, "Okay." I waited for a while, but he didn't come home, not even after midnight. He finally got back around 4 a.m. I couldn't talk to him about work. The next day and the day after that, he came home late again, and there was no chance to discuss his job. Ever since Ken started at my company, he'd been coming home extremely late. Every day it was overtime, and on weekends he'd say he had business trips and wouldn't come home. Is his branch really that busy? Even when we did see each other at home, he seemed distant.
Have you been busy lately?
"Yeah, but what about dinner?" he responded, almost dismissively. His attitude was somewhat arrogant. When I tried to talk to him, he only gave me vague responses like yeah or oh. So, I couldn't bring up the subject of work. Then, one day, he called me, saying he wanted to talk. I was happy he initiated a conversation for the first time in a while, but judging by his expression, it wasn't going to be a pleasant one. "She's pregnant. I want a divorce." What? My mind went blank.
What do you mean?
"I got a girl at my new job pregnant. She's much younger and cuter than you." When I told my mom about her, she was thrilled, saying we'd probably have kids. Is this a joke? Even my mother-in-law knew? Is that why she stopped calling me so persistently? I had suspected something was off with his recent behavior, but I never imagined he was actually having an affair, and had a child with her within less than a year of changing jobs.
When did this start?
About a month after I joined. She was a new hire, and since I was a mid-career hire, we started at the same time and hit it off. If he had been seeing her for a month after starting, it matched the timing when he told me to stop trying for a baby. I thought it was strange that he suddenly wanted to stop, especially since he had been so eager for kids. I was stunned into silence. Here, this is the divorce paper. Ken thrust the divorce papers at me. All right. Let's get divorced. Well, that's it. His condescending attitude was appalling. Honestly, I just wanted to get away from him as soon as possible. And so, our divorce was finalized without any issues. Our marriage ended so abruptly that it made me question what the past few years had been for. 3 days after the divorce was finalized, I moved out and stayed in a hotel until I found a new place. Ken planned to live with his affair partner in the house we once shared. 2 weeks have passed since then. While my emotional wounds hadn't healed, I found a new place and was ready for a fresh start. That's when our company announced its anniversary party. When I arrived at the venue, it was packed with people, and I wandered around looking for my seat. Then, I spotted a familiar face staring at me with wide eyes. What the hell are you doing here? It was my ex-husband, Ken. Standing next to him was a cute girl in her early 20s with a noticeable baby bump. Who is she? She asked, clutching Ken's sleeve. From her behavior, I immediately knew she was his affair partner. Ken seemed shocked to see me, clearly not realizing we worked at the same company. Oh, I didn't tell you. The company you transferred to is where I work. What? Why didn't you say anything? You didn't tell me about your job change either. You didn't even tell me the name of the company. All you do is argue. It's disgusting that we work at the same company. I thought I was finally rid of you. I'm the one disappointed that we're at the same company. Oh yeah, you should quit. You're single now, right? You can manage on your own without a job. I have a family to support, so I can't quit. Ken was being extra hostile, probably to show off in front of his girlfriend. The girl, joining in, said, "What? Is she a stalker? That's so creepy. Seriously? I was working here first, so if anyone's a stalker, it's Ken." But I held my tongue. Clearly, Ken's girlfriend wasn't very bright. Yeah, it's a shock. I thought I'd never have to see your face again. Good thing we're in different branches. I can't afford to have weird rumors spread about me. I didn't want to see your face either. And if there are any rumors, they're your fault. Ken scowled, clearly irritated that I hit a nerve. How's the infertility treatment going? Oh wait, there's no point now since you don't have a husband. Ken told me his ex-wife was an infertile old hag. The two of them started laughing at me. They seemed completely oblivious to their own situation. I sighed and asked, "So, how's everything going for you?" "What do you mean, work or personal life?" "As you can see, everything's great, unlike you," Ken said, giving me a smug look. "Oh Ken, you're so cool," his dim-witted girlfriend squealed. They were a perfect match, living in their own delusional world. I couldn't believe I had been married to this man and lost to this woman. It was pathetic. Really? Everything's great? Well, you might not be saying that next month, I said with a knowing smile. Ken looked startled by my expression. What do you mean by that? Well, it's my turn next, I said, ignoring his confused look as I stood up and walked towards the stage. As I approached, the MC announced, "Next, we'll hear from our executive officer, Kelly Smith." I took the microphone and began my speech. Ken and his girlfriend stood there in shock, staring at me. When he realized I was an executive officer at the company, my ex-husband went into a complete panic. Even from a distance, I could see him mouthing, "Oh no, and this is bad. I've been an executive officer here for 6 months. Thanks to everyone's support, our company celebrates its 30th anniversary this year." I finished reading the prepared speech, completing my role for the day. Now, it was time for my payback. As soon as I stepped down, Ken rushed over to me, with his affair partner following closely behind. "You're an executive?" "Yes, I am. I was promoted 6 months ago."
The HR announcement was made, but I guess you didn't read it?
That's impossible. I just joined and haven't been transferred, so I didn't look at any HR announcements. He didn't bother to look at the HR announcements because he wasn't expecting a transfer. Not even knowing the names of the company's executives. It's pathetic.
Well, you should start reading them from now on. You're being transferred.
What?
He looked at me, dumbfounded. Shortly after you joined, complaints about you started piling up. Many staff members at your branch have complained about you.
What do you mean?
Ken started stuttering, clearly realizing what he had done. Let me read some of the complaints. Let's see. He makes a lot of creepy, harassing comments. He touched my butt, pretending it was a joke. He goes out with female employees under the pretense of work meetings and doesn't return. He spends large amounts of money at nightclubs and tries to expense it. He pushes hard tasks onto others. His attitude is condescending, and so on. The list is endless. I read aloud from my phone, which had the details I received from the HR head. As he listened to the list of complaints, my ex-husband turned pale and started trembling. With all this information, I have no choice but to consider your punishment, right?
Well, what? Ken, you did all that?
His affair partner, who seemed clueless, looked shocked. Ken, trying to come up with excuses, stammered, "Well, that's why you're being transferred. Next month, you'll be working at our branch in South Korea."
South Korea? This can't be happening.
They were both visibly shaken by the news of the overseas transfer. Our South Korea branch is relatively new and involves a lot of hard work. Most of the staff there are locals, so without some proficiency in Korean, it would be difficult to communicate. Everyone at the company knows this. But given that Ken didn't even bother to know the names of the executives, it's doubtful he knew about this either. It's essentially a demotion. However, if he works hard and proves himself, there's a chance for promotion. It's high risk, high reward. But for Ken, who has a baby on the way, it's a tough situation. It's true. Work hard over there.
Please, we were married. You're an executive, right? Can't you do something? With your power, you can change this. Please, I'm begging you. I'll apologize for everything. You know we're having a baby. Please, forgive Ken. I can't raise the child alone.
Contrary to their earlier arrogance, both Ken and his affair partner were now pleading with tears in their eyes. But no amount of apologizing would make me forgive them. Had they not treated me so horribly today, I might have reconsidered for the sake of their child. But after their behavior, I was resolved not to change my decision. I've thought about this a lot. Ken betrayed me, and I wasn't sure if I should forgive him. But considering the child, I wanted to find a different solution. But now, you've made my decision easy. Thanks for helping me make up my mind.
This can't be happening.
Ken collapsed, unable to stand any longer. Ignoring their pleas, I walked away. Eventually, the announcement of Ken's transfer to the South Korea branch was made official. Ken struggled with the decision but ultimately decided to resign. He couldn't leave his new wife and unborn child behind. So, despite his recent job change, Ken ended up quitting and becoming unemployed. He moved into a shabby house and took on multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. As for me, my work is my new love. While I hope to find romance again someday, I don't see that happening anytime soon. But for now, I enjoy being immersed